Here now, co-anchor Martha Raddatz.
Good morning and welcome to This Week as we celebrate July 4th weekend. This Independence Day, a big step toward a return to normal life for many Americans as we celebrate this holiday together. On the National Mall right now, ahead of tonight's fireworks, thousands expected to come together for an in-person presentation, like so many across the country planning face-to-face celebrations. And holiday travel is surging, with 43 million Americans hitting the roads. That's up 5% from even before the pandemic. Air travel exceeding pre-pandemic levels for the first time on Thursday and again on Friday. 58% of adults are now fully vaccinated and 67% have received at least one dose. But that's still shy of President Biden's goal for 70% of adults to get at least one shot by July 4th, a race that's taking on more urgency as the Delta variant spreads. So will that goal ever be met? With the vaccine now readily available, what's behind that hesitancy? Those questions and more for White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients, plus Rebecca Jarvis standing by with the latest on the economic recovery. But we begin this morning with our return to West Virginia, once leading the pack in vaccination distribution, a model for the nation, now near the bottom of the pack for fully vaccinated residents. What can their example tell us about the vaccine effort nationwide? We hit the road to find out. And Ellie, you are not vaccinated.
Not yet.
It's something we heard over and over and over again. You're not vaccinated?
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I just don't believe in it, I guess.
Their reasoning? They're young and healthy. Why not?
Right now I don't think I'm at risk for it that much.
As we hit Independence Day, shots in arms are slowing down, and the people most hesitant, young adults.
Hang out for about 15 minutes, okay?
When we first visited West Virginia last January, at the beginning of the vaccine rollout, it was a success story. Dr. Sherry Young was overseeing a massive operation at Charleston's Convention Center. But today, at this local health department, Young is struggling to even get a handful of people vaccinated.
We were busting out of the scene, so we had to go to the convention center across the street, where we did 5,344 in our best day.
Yeah.
And now we're back down to doing 8 to 10 a day.
8 to 10 a day?
Yes.
How do you convince those people who aren't getting it to do it?
Well, any way we can.
Around the country, states are trying to entice residents to get the shots. In Ohio, a new $1 million winner is announced each week. Out west, millions of vaccinated Californians will be receiving $50 gift cards. And West Virginia is doing everything it can to get people to get vaccinated. They're offering free hunting licenses, free fishing licenses, free hunting rifles, and even four-year scholarships. Despite being among the first states to get its older residents vaccinated, Governor Jim Justice is frustrated with the statewide slowdown. Only 46% of West Virginians are fully vaccinated.
The young people, were having a hard time getting them across the finish line and getting them vaccinated.
It's the old, you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? I mean, you provided the vaccine, and yet...
But maybe what you got to do is lead them to water, and then if they won't drink, you got to just some way stand up and push their head down to some way at least a few will drink.
Nationally, 67% of adults have received one dose, still shy of the Biden administration's 70% goal by the 4th of July. But that percent plummets with age. Only 39.5% of people between 18 and 24 years old are fully vaccinated. And among those not vaccinated, 74%, up from 55% in April, say they probably or definitely won't get a shot. Let's go back to who's not getting vaccinated. The statistics will show it's poverty, race, and you just look at the map, it's a lot of red states.
Well, I mean, there's some truth to that and everything, because, the red states probably have a lot of people that, are very, very conservative in their thinking, and they think, well, I don't have to do that. But they're not thinking right. When it really boils right down to it, they're in a lottery to themselves. You know, we have a lottery, you know, that basically says, if you're vaccinated, we're going to give you stuff. Well, you've got another lottery going on, and it's the death lottery.
This past week, the highly contagious Delta variant now reported in every state. In West Virginia, those cases have quadrupled in the last few days. The governor tells me he's scared to death about that growth rate. Do you really think those people who aren't vaccinated, who, as you said, may be more conservative, may not want anybody in their business, are really ever going to get vaccinated? What could actually put them over the edge to want it at this point?
Well, Martha, I hate to say this, but what would put them over the edge is an awful lot of people die. The only way that's really going to happen is a catastrophe that none of us want. And so we just got to keep trying, though.
And there is a glimmer of hope in West Virginia. 20-year-old Allie Kirk was reluctant to get the shot.
Yeah, we'll go this way.
But while we were there, walked into her local drugstore and finally did it.
Yes. I'm here to get the vaccine.
What changed your mind?
Well, a lot of my friends started getting it. My parents are vaccinated. I felt a lot more comfortable with it. I did research on my own, and I felt that it was time for me to get it. I was ready. I'm ready to move past COVID and get on with life back to normal.
Despite falling short of President Biden's goal to vaccinate 70% of adults by July 4th, this weekend the White House is celebrating progress in the fight against the pandemic. Here to discuss, White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients. Good morning, Mr. Zients. The administration clearly has much to be proud of this July 4th, but you did miss that goal largely because of young people. What was the miscalculation there?
Well, I think, first of all, we do have a lot to celebrate. We are much further along than I think anyone anticipated in this fight against the pandemic. 2 out of 3 adult Americans, those over 18, have received at least their first dose of the vaccination. And importantly, close to 90% of people 65 and older have received at least one dose, and about 80% are fully vaccinated. That's so important because they were the most vulnerable during the pandemic, during the earlier stages of the pandemic, before the vaccinations. They accounted for 80% of COVID deaths. You're right, younger people, particularly those in their 20s, have felt less vulnerable to the disease and therefore less eager to get shots. They were made eligible later, so they have not been eligible as long, and we continue to see hundreds of thousands of young people vaccinated each week, but we need to continue to vaccinate everyone, particularly young people, because what we know is if you are vaccinated, you're protected. And if you're not vaccinated, you're not protected. And that's particularly important for everyone, including young people, in light of the Delta variant. So we are going to continue our efforts to vaccinate all Americans by making it easier to get vaccinated and continue to answer people's questions about the efficacy and the safety of the vaccines, meeting people where they are, particularly at doctors' offices. But
Mr. Zients,
to ask questions and get vaccines.
Mr. Zients, but you look at those states which are falling way behind in vaccinations. The doctor we talked to in West Virginia, the governor, our polls even show that 74% of those people will probably not or definitely won't get a shot. So what does it mean for getting rid of the virus nationwide? Will it continue to be with us indefinitely?
Well, if you are not vaccinated, you are vulnerable. You're not protected. And we are seeing increases in cases in those areas in the country where there's lower vaccination rates. So it's really important that people get vaccinated. The good news is confidence in the vaccine, those saying they're willing to get vaccinated, has increased across time as more and more people know people who have been vaccinated and can see the benefits of being vaccinated. So we'll continue to make it even easier to get vaccinated, answer people's questions. It's free. It's convenient. Most pharmacies, which are within 5 miles of 90% of Americans, have no appointment walk-up vaccinations. We'll continue to deploy mobile clinics to bring vaccinations to where people are. And as I said earlier, Vaccines are
But what does it mean if they don't?
Physicians' offices, doctors' offices.
We know it's easy to get, but what does it mean for the nation if we have all these unvaccinated people who say they're just not going to get it?
Well, we are vaccinating millions of Americans each week, and we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to drive up the vaccination rate, and we're optimistic that more and more people will get vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, you're protected. If you're not vaccinated, you're not protected. You're putting yourself at risk and your loved ones and your friends and those around you at risk. So the important thing is for people to get vaccinated as soon as possible. When you're not vaccinated, you need to wear a mask and take this public safety precautions and get vaccinated as soon as possible.
And Mr. Zients, there also seems to be some mixed messaging going on here. The president says he's concerned about the highly contagious Delta variant, which is contributing to about a 10% rise in cases from last week. And yet today, about 1,000 people are coming to the White House for a 4th of July celebration. Now, I assume they're taking precautions, but is having large crowds gather really the right message right now?
Well, we've made a lot of progress as a country, as I said earlier. We are much further along than anyone anticipated, with 2 out of 3 adult Americans already having received their first dose. That is worthy of celebration, and the event at the White House is being done in the right way. It's an outdoor event with testing and screening, vaccinated people not wearing masks, unvaccinated people masked. So it's being done in the right way, consistent with CDC guidelines. That said, we are doubling down on our efforts. Across the summer months, we will vaccinate millions more people because you need to get vaccinated to be protected against the Delta variant and against this disease overall.
Thanks so much, Mr. Zients. Happy 4th.
And thank you, Martha. Happy 4th. And please, if you're not vaccinated, begin your vaccination routine as soon as possible.
Another milestone this weekend, the U.S. posting strong job growth. 850,000 added jobs in June, the most in 10 months. And this morning, our new ABC News Washington Post poll finding half of Americans approve of President Biden's job performance. Biden crediting his COVID relief bill for fueling the growth.
None of this happened by accident. Again, it's a direct result of the American Rescue Plan. Our economy is on the move, and we have COVID-19 on the run.
Here to discuss is our chief business and economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis. Good morning, Rebecca. Friday's job report showed strong numbers, over 100,000 more than expected in June. And you heard President Biden just say this is a direct result of his COVID relief plan. How much do you think that contributed? And what do the numbers really tell us about the economy overall?
Good morning, Martha. Well, forecasters have consistently predicted a strong rebound around the reopening. The key question was what fundamental damage would the pandemic leave behind? How many businesses would go out of business? How many consumers would have to suffer as a result of the pandemic? And it seems clear that a lot of the stimulus, the multiple rounds of it, have kept many businesses still operating and many consumers from having to file for personal bankruptcy, missing their bills, getting kicked out of their homes. That's the good news. And consumers, by the way, are sitting now on $1 trillion in cash as a result of not spending a lot during the pandemic and also those multiple rounds of stimulus checks. That's a lot of buying power, which is great news for the economy. The key question now is not are the jobs there, it is are the workers there to take them. Of the 22 million jobs that were lost during the pandemic, about 16 million, a little bit fewer than 16 million people have gone back to work. And Martha, the key question for the economy going forward is how long is it going to take to bring all of those people back into the workforce and into jobs, Martha?
And Rebecca, many companies are still dealing with supply issues because of the pandemic causing shortages. And at the same time, consumers are in a rush to spend their pandemic savings. This is already sparking concerns over holiday shopping. And I'm talking about Christmas. What's the outlook?
Yeah, and there are a lot of stores that are concerned now, big retailers that are concerned about whether they're going to be able to get the very items that people will be ordering over the Christmas holiday season. You've already seen it if you've ordered anything over the last handful of months. It takes a longer time in many cases to get those packages delivered. And this question about the supply shortage, coupled with the fact that you have people perhaps not going back to work who could be, that's a key question for the economy going forward, because as long as people who might be able to work aren't working and demanding at the same time buying more things with their money and the supplies aren't coming through, that creates a major disruption for the economy. And Martha, right now, when people want to spend money, you want to have the supplies there available to meet them. You hate to see the stores as you pass them on the street who say, sorry, we have to be closed today because we don't have the workers who are available to serve you.
Drawdown is going to be done in the next few days.
No, we're on track exactly as to where we expect it to be.
Are you worried that the Afghan government might fall?
I think they have the capacity to be able to sustain the government.
I thought on Afghanistan.
I want to talk about happy things, man.
President Biden chafing after questions on the drawdown of troops from America's longest war. This week, after nearly 2 decades, 4 presidents, $2 trillion, and the loss of more than 2,300 American lives, the U.S. moved up the timeline to end its major military commitment to Afghanistan, now set for late August, and turned over Bagram Air Base to Afghan forces, a huge milestone, and for many, a worrisome one. Over the past 20 years, I have made countless trips to Afghanistan, and last week was the only reporter there as the commanding general made his last trip to Bagram to watch the final preparations for withdrawal. General Scott Miller was in Afghanistan at the beginning of the war and is here for the end, flying low over Bagram, where more than 30,000 troops were once housed. The fighter and attack jets now gone, the base all but abandoned. General Miller, who has spent 9 years of his life deployed as a special operations officer, never imagined he would oversee the withdrawal of America's troops.
As you watch this, it certainly is a flash of memories and reminders of coming through Afghanistan over the years.
The history on this base is staggering. Countless missions were launched from this airfield, and countless wounded were medevaced here. It was Bagram where Osama bin Laden's body was flown after the raid into Pakistan. I watched it all up close over these decades, from Bagram to remote outposts, the triumphs and the heartbreaking loss. John Campbell, always with the cards he carried to remember each soldier killed in battle.
What do you think about those soldiers?
I think about them every day.
General David Petraeus, after nearly a decade of war.
Your thoughts on the anniversary of 9/11, 9 years of war.
And taking off from this very base on an F-15 combat mission.
We are upside down over the mountains.
But after all these years, all these missions, the Taliban is once again gaining strength as Afghan forces surrender or are massacred through districts across the country. The majority of the districts that have been taken are many, many miles from here in Kabul. But the big question is, what happens here when all of the U.S. forces leave Afghanistan? We traveled to the outskirts of Kabul to the home of a Taliban elder, a senior leader when the Taliban was in charge of this country. The Taliban is taking over many districts across Afghanistan. Will they eventually come here to Kabul? There is no doubt, says the Taliban elder, and that is a clear concern for General Miller. What's happening right now, and how alarmed are you?
We should be concerned. The loss of terrain and the rapidity of that loss of terrain has to be concerning. One, because it's a war is physical, but it's also got a psychological or moral component to it. And hope actually matters and morale actually matters. And so as you watch the Taliban moving across the country, what you don't want to have happen is that the people lose hope and they believe they now have a foregone conclusion presented to them.
And for those who work for the Americans, the fear is overwhelming.
You're hiding. I'm hiding right down here.
Abdul will only use his first name, an interpreter and father of 3, living in fear of a Taliban resurgence.
If they take over of the Kabul, directly they will come and they will behead us or they will kill us.
The U.S. is trying to get the interpreters out of the country, but some Afghans are determined to stay.
This is the time to be here in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan needs us.
Camilla Siddiqui is a business owner and economic and women's activist.
A lot of people just died, and there is a lot of bomb blasting in society, and there is no safety anywhere, not in Kabul and not in any province of Afghanistan.
Though her husband and children are now in London, she is not leaving. For Scott Miller, the thought of Afghan partners fending for themselves is painful and personal. It has to be heartbreaking for you, leaving them behind and fearing what might come next.
I don't like leaving friends in need, and I know my friends are in need.
There will be U.S. economic and security assistance, but without the U.S. military, the general is still worried.
If you look at the security situation, it's not good. The Afghans have recognized it's not good. The Taliban are on the move. We're starting to create conditions here that won't look good for Afghanistan in the future if there's a push for a military takeover.
Senior military leaders had advised the president that a contingent of around 2,500 troops should remain in Afghanistan. Miller will not say what his advice was. Would you have liked to have seen a small force stay here?
Let me hold on that one.
But very much on his mind, what happened when all U.S. troops pulled out of Iraq and then ISIS moved in. I want to just go back to the Iraq. Do you think about Iraq when we're leaving here and what happened in Iraq when we left?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's on everybody's mind. It's again, these are judgments that we have to make balanced against our national interests.
Whatever happens here in the future, says the general, does not take away from the accomplishments of those who served, but says there are lessons that should be learned. How do you think this war will be remembered?
I would like us not to just turn our backs on this. I think there are tremendous lessons, and they're not all positives. And there's victories as well, so we can celebrate those. But good organizations really learn from those things that didn't go as well as they want to. An honest self-reflection, that's going to be important going forward.
Indeed it is. For more now on U.S. troop withdrawal, let's bring in someone who has spent 15 years reporting on Afghanistan, especially the plight of women there. Gail Zamak-Laman, adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and author of The Dressmaker of Karkhana. Good to see you, Gail. I have heard general after general, as you have, say, just give us a little more time. Politicians say it as well, and yet you cannot call this a successful effort, given what's going on with the Taliban. So when you look at it, why isn't Biden right just pulling out those troops?
Afghanistan has always been a story of dark clouds and green shoots. And they've lived right alongside each other. And what you saw depended on where you sat. And I think the moment now is not about the military piece. The moment now is about what is the political future, what's going to happen in terms of economic development and aid, and how do you keep people safe who have supported the United States for the past, 19 years.
General Miller told me he didn't think the Taliban had changed. We're negotiating with the Taliban right now, but he doesn't think they've really changed from 1996 to 2021. So how do you negotiate with them when they're taking over the country?
So Afghanistan 2021 is not Afghanistan 1996 when the Taliban swept Kabul. And Kabul is a very different place in a rapidly urbanizing country. Think about this. 2/3 of the country is 25 and under. They don't even remember the Taliban last time around. And the question is, how do you protect the gains made by young people who have fought every single day for a brighter future?
And I know you've been in communication with Afghan women, and often are. What are you hearing? Senator Jean Shaheen says she wants some sort of law helping women over there. Can we really do that? How much influence do we really have at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. has leverage. First of all, it's the United States. There is diplomatic leverage. There has to be with Ghani, and there has to be a push for a conversation that includes the discussion of what happens with women, right? That aid going forward in the future has to have some relevance to that. Secondly, think about what's happened. You know, Herat University is 51% female, right? Most of the people applying for Herat University are women. You have this whole generation that it looks very different. Has the Taliban changed? Most people living under Taliban rules say no, it hasn't. But there's no question that it understands the environment it's coming back into is very different than the one it left when it left power. And while it might have technicals and technical vehicles, it doesn't have technocrats. And it knows it needs engineers, doctors, and all of that to govern. So yes, the U.S. has leverage.
Well, we hope they have a bright future, but very concerned still. Always great to talk to you again.
Great to be with you.
Up next, the roundtable takes on possible legal jeopardy for former President Trump, plus the fallout after the consequential Supreme Court decision upholding 2 restrictive voting laws in Arizona. Stay with us.
The radical left continues to search for a crime and wreck lives, break laws, violate every principle of justice, fairness, and liberty. You see it. You see it on a constant basis. It's really called prosecutorial misconduct. You didn't pay tax on the car, or a company apartment, or education for your grandchildren. I don't even know. Do you have to? But does anybody know the answer to that stuff?
Former President Trump sounding off last night after prosecutors in New York indicted the Trump Organization and its CFO on tax fraud charges. Here to discuss that and much more, Time national political correspondent Molly Ball, ABC News Deputy Political Director Avery Harper, Washington Post national correspondent Mary Jordan, and ABC News contributor LZ Granderson, host of ABC's Life Out Loud podcast. Great to see all of you on this 4th of July, and thanks for coming in. And Avery, I want to start with Donald Trump. The case against the Trump Organization and its CFO, President Trump, was not himself charged, but this is his namesake company. How big of a deal is this?
Well, listen, the investigation is ongoing in the New York State's Attorney General's office and the Manhattan DA's office. And so if there's any evidence that surfaces that implicates the president, he could be in legal jeopardy. And look, Alan Weisselberg is facing 15 felonies. And so we don't know what he's going to do. We know that that the former president spoke with John Santucci earlier this week, and he said he didn't believe that Weisselberg would flip on him. But listen, time will tell.
And Molly, the former president has, you heard, blasted the charges as partisan, no surprise there. But do you think he's at all worried? I was also fascinated by what he said there. It's almost as if he admitted that all really happened, that they didn't pay taxes.
Well, and you see him trying to run the same playbook that he did for the scandals that beset him during his administration, right? Portray it as a partisan witch hunt, and then basically in a way, admit to things while claiming that they're all okay, they're all normal, these are all regular ways of doing business, that anyone would be perplexed by the kinds of things being charged by the prosecutors. The question is, does that hit the same when you're not president anymore? When you're just a guy throwing a rally and you don't even have a Twitter account, does it have the same resonance? Does it affect the course of events? And I think what he's going to find is the prosecutors in New York are relatively immune to that kind of pressure. And so the question will be, does that have any effect, or is he going to have to mount some more formal defense?
And Mary, what's also notable in this is what wasn't in the indictment. Nothing on the alleged hush money paid to Stormy Daniels, nor inflating assets, as Michael Cohen testified before Congress. Do you think those charges are still possible?
Well, as several people have said, this is the first series of indictments. There's much more to come, they think. But also people are worried, like this is all they have. They've been talking to Michael Cohen, his fixer and lawyer, for a long time, the prosecutors. Now they're trying to get another person who's been on the inside for 5 decades. Clearly, the feeling is that they want more to get this guy. I mean, he has been Houdini. He beat impeachment twice It's been very hard to get him, but it is really interesting that now he's not saying he didn't do this. He's just saying, hey, it's not murder.
Yeah, that's exactly right. LZ, former President Trump is still teasing a comeback, of course, running again in 2024. Do you think that's something the Republican Party would welcome?
It seems so, because they're still willing to follow his lead in a lot of areas. I mean, if you think about all of the bills that are being passed across the country right now in terms of, voter registration, voter restrictions, they are all based upon the lie that came from Trump, who's the original source of all of this. So I think there's legislative proof that, yes, they're still willing to follow his lead, despite the fact that he has these allegations around him.
You don't think there's anything behind the scenes there, Republicans saying, we got to follow him now, but whew, hopefully he won't run?
I mean, they've been saying that for 5 years. We got to follow him now. They've just been following him.
Okay. And on the January 6th committee, Avery, this week the House voted to establish a select committee to investigate the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Just two Republicans voted for it. And Speaker Pelosi tapped one of them, Liz Cheney, to serve on the committee. So can this kind of committee really get to the bottom of this?
Well, listen, I think the folks who have been appointed to that committee are certainly going to try. And it was really important for Speaker Pelosi to nominate and to appoint Liz Cheney to that position, because regardless of what the Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy does, whether he decides he's going to put some far-right or Trump loyalists onto that committee, or he decides not to put any Republicans up for that committee at all, there is going to be a bipartisan group of lawmakers trying to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th.
And Molly, Republicans are already blasting this as partisan. How will it work for them? How does Kevin McCarthy choose people to be on the committee?
Well, the ball is really in Kevin McCarthy's court, and he has repeatedly declined to say whether he's going to appoint anyone to this committee at all. The feeling on Capitol Hill is that he probably will, but then will those people see their role primarily as undermining the committee, as trying to prevent it from going to certain places, particularly as it looks to former President Trump's role in the events of January 6th, because that is really the sort of red-hot center of all of the controversy surrounding this committee. So, it's less about what it will find, I think, since there are, as Republicans have repeatedly said, so many other agencies and law enforcement jurisdictions looking at what happened, unearthing the evidence, charging individuals. It's more about, as the 9/11 Commission did, bringing all that evidence together to create a shared understanding, a shared narrative that Americans can use to understand. And so, the Republicans don't want to be part of that process, and they have succeeded, I think, in large part in preventing there from being a sort of bipartisan shared America of this traumatic event. So I don't know how successful the committee can be going forward in that circumstance.
And LZ, what do you think the committee can accomplish, and particularly the racism that was evident on January 6th? I was up there, lots of white supremacists, lots of Confederate flags. How do you think this will play out?
I think this committee serves two purposes. One, obviously, is to get to the bottom of what happened. But then the other is also to send a clear message to people who are thinking or who may be on the fence in terms of where they want to pledge their allegiances. Where I grew up in Detroit, we had this phrase, you don't want that smoke. And basically what that means is there might be trouble that you might talk a good game about, but when real pressure comes and real accountability is being held, people who really aren't fully committed to a certain cause may begin to back down. So hopefully just the presence of this committee at least gives people who don't want that smoke, who like talking and tweeting, but won't do things that are dangerous and impact the larger society.
And Mary, how do you think this will impact the midterms? Before voting down that 9/11 style independent commission, several Republicans said they were really worried about this dragging into 2022.
I think all this it's all about the midterms. It's crucial. Kevin McCarthy could become the House Speaker if they gain back. Not going to take too many seats. And what they don't want, what the Republicans don't want is, imagine all the TV clips of a police officer talking about what happened, that he couldn't get back up, that it was right from the top, from the president on down. So I think that eventually the truth will be known, but right now there's a lot of Republicans who are trying to put the brakes on it because of the midterms.
And Avery, I want to turn to the Supreme Court and the voting rights. ruling in this case out of Arizona. Explain the case and what you think this will mean.
Well, it was a 6-3 decision on ideological lines to uphold voting restrictions in Arizona that Democrats and voting advocates called discriminatory on the basis of race. And because of this decision, it's going to deal a blow to that fight against what voting advocates would call voter suppression in Republican-led states across the country. And the fact is that the American people are not on the side of the Republican lawmakers in some of these states. 2-1, if you look at the ABC Washington Post poll, you see that Americans believe that it is more important to have voting laws that make it easier to vote lawfully than laws that make it harder to vote fraudulently.
And particularly in Georgia. Everyone's looking at Georgia right now, Molly.
That's right. Although this is, all over the country that these kinds of laws are being considered and passed. And frankly, the sort of Democratic establishment is concerned that they have not effectively countered this push. Whether you're talking about in Congress, where the big, what they call democracy reform bill went down, or whether you're talking about in the states, where I think this case more than anything sent a clear signal about how the Supreme Court is going to look at the Democratic attempts to litigate these laws. The lawsuits that are being brought in various states, and in Georgia you have the Justice Department involved. That of course makes it a different story than simply a lawsuit. But even there you have to wonder about how the courts are going to look at attempts to combat these laws using the legal system. And so if it's not going to happen on Capitol Hill, if it's not going to happen in the courts, then it has to happen in the political process. And it's going to be about, as Avery is saying, using the fact that these laws are unpopular to try to motivate Democratic voters.
And exactly, Elsie, as Avery pointed out and Molly pointed out, not exactly in line with public opinion.
No, of course not, but they don't really care about public opinion, right? If they did, then all of this legislation would be looking at differently. The thing that really frustrates me most is that the justices acknowledge that these new laws does impact minorities. They didn't deny that aspect of it. They just said that the inconvenience of it isn't so great. Well, they're all privileged. And I grew up poor. I remember my mom scraping together 50 cents, 75 cents, $1 just for gas money to get to the grocery store. When you do that to polling places, now you're forcing minorities to decide whether or not they're going to invest money, gas money, to get to the polling places that are now far further away, or do I use this gas money to get to the grocery store, or do I get to work? They're privileged, saying that this doesn't inconvenience them enough. Well, how do you know? When was the last time you were that poor?
I'd like to talk about, I went down to Mississippi and I saw this, and on the morning of the election, people would turn out and the polling place would be closed in the place where there were a lot of Democratic voters. And so the question then was, okay, do I drive? Do I spend another, 45 minutes in the car to go there and then wait in a really long line? There's all kinds of dirty tricks being played about closing polls, switching where you're supposed to be, telling people they're in the wrong place, even if in the right place. I think if people really knew what was going on, because it differs state by state and county by county, they would think, you know what, it's July 4th here. It's all about voting, right? It's the most fundamental of rights. We had the Boston Tea Party because we couldn't vote. We were getting taxed. And it's kind of shocking that right now a lot of people don't have the same access to votes as other Americans.
But we certainly, Molly, wouldn't be shocked by the Supreme Court decision and the direction it went.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think given that the way the court is composed, and what you hear from a lot of conservatives, too, is that this decision was rather limited. It applied to a couple of specific situations, specifically votes in the wrong precinct and ballot harvesting. It wasn't about closing polling places or a lot of the other things that have been alleged. So in some quarters on the right, there's a feeling that the Democrats are sort of hyperventilating about this. But, it obviously has implications for so many other cases that are being brought and so many other laws that are being litigated across the country.
And Avery, speaking of Democrats, does this up the pressure on moderate Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to push harder for new voting legislation, or what?
Well, listen, this is definitely going to revive the conversation around eliminating the filibuster. And for those Democrats who've been wary of filibuster reform, this is going to be a confrontation to them. They're going to have to square their defense of a legislative body with the protection of voting rights for American voters who are really at the heart of the democracy that they say they hold dear.
Okay. We are going to have much more with all of you guys on the round table. We'll be right back.